Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro, and today we're looking at Psalm 31 verses 11 and 12. Now, we're doing Psalm 31 in two parts because it's 24 verses long, and I didn't want to try to do it all in 1 week. It would just be too much. Because we're, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week, studying the Psalms verse by verse, and we want to try to keep it as close to that as possible. David said in verse 9 that he had trouble. He said, "Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I have trouble." All right, we talked about that yesterday. Now, today, with 11 and 12, we're going to find out something about his trouble, and we're going to see just how really bad it is. Hey, listen, before we jump into the verses here, go out to the Bible Bistro website, www.my-dailydose.com, and you'll find all kinds of devotional content there. I've been advertising this week my books. Check out the books. They're available on Kindle as well as in paperback. I have two that are in a series called His Garden of Spices. And that series is about Psalm 119. Right now it is, because I have two books. Wondrous Things is one I just published this fall. And before that, Finding His Way. They're both poetry based in Psalm 119. I have a book coming out this spring. It's called, I haven't named it yet, but it's about the Song of Solomon. And so it's going to be a commentary and poetry based in the Song of Solomon. So I hope that you'll check that out as well. Purchase those. You can go to Amazon and find your copy right there. Today we're looking at verses 11 and 12. Let me read those for us. "Among all my enemies I was a reproach. To my neighbors very much an object of dread to my kindred. Those who see me out and about flee from me. I am forgotten, like the dead, out of mind. I am like a shattered vessel." Now, we know that the enemy has laid a net for him there in verse 4. Of course, we related that to what the council did with Christ. He also mentions the enemy there in verse 8. "Do not deliver me up into the hand of my enemy." They're working against him. These are the ones that keep lying vanities. These are the ones that have hidden the net for him. When he comes to verse 11, we know of his vexation, we know of his sorrow, we know of his trouble. But now he's going to describe it. And he describes it in such a very illustrative way because he gives us how others see him. He says, my enemies, to them, I'm a reproach. His name is a curse. He's without value. To be a reproach to somebody means that you have, they hold no goodwill towards you whatsoever. They want you gone. You're nothing but a problem for them. And so Jesus, as we said, this psalm has been kissed on the cross because Christ actually said those words there in verse 5 on the cross. And we know that the enemy that put him there, to him he was a reproach. He was a curse. He was nothing but garbage to be discarded. "To my neighbors very much." So not only the enemy, but his neighbors around him, he was a reproach as well, and they didn't want anything to do with him. And then he goes on to his kindred, an object of dread to my kindred. So the enemy, the neighbor, the kindred, all of those, he was an outcast. He was as the offal that you throw in the ditch. They didn't want him. So even to his kindred, he's an object of dread. They don't even like to look at him. Then he says, those that just happen to see me. So the enemy, the neighbor, the kindred, and then just those who happen to see me out and about. Don't even know them. They don't live close to me. They're not related to me. They're not my enemy necessarily, but they just see me. He says, they flee from me. His disease or whatever trouble he had, boy, it must have been bad. It must have been ugly. And of course, as we relate this to Christ on the cross, we know how poorly that he was treated and how grossly he was disfigured. Verse 12, I am forgotten like the dead, out of mind. I am like a shattered vessel. So nobody remembered him. Nobody wanted to remember him. What do you do with a plate that you break at your house or a cup that breaks at your house? If you can't repair it, what do you do with it? You throw it away because there's nothing else to be done with it. And so that's how they treated him. They threw him away. That's how deep his trouble was. Friend, if you are having that kind of trouble, remember the prayer in verse 9, be gracious to me, O Lord, for I have trouble. Join me again next week, and we'll pick up right there in verse 13 here in Psalm 31 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.